Hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are chatting about finding your purpose in the pain of life's struggles. My good friend Erin Cuccio is joining us today. So glad to have you here with us, Erin. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to our friends here online in case they missed our previous episode when we chatted last time.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back. It is always an honor to be here with you. I am so grateful to join you guys again. But for those who may not have caught the first episode, my name is Erin Cuccio, and I am a mama to three boys. I am an author and a speaker and a podcaster, and all of those things keep my life very full. Just navigating all of that, a professional Uber driver, taking the boys to all of their practices and all of the things, but it's a good full life.
Yes, yeah, you have to be exhausted.
Most of the
Any
time,
mom
yes.
that does all of that is exhausted for sure. Any mom that does half of that is exhausted. So we're super glad to have you here. So, in our last conversation, I believe it was episode number 67, we went pretty deep and you shared a lot about your story of losing your precious Jacob, your infant son, at birth. And, I just cannot imagine what you went through and how difficult that was. And yet you're here. Doing amazing, and you're such an inspiration to us. You described grief during that time frame as a gift, which is very counterculture to most of us. Can you explain why you felt that way?
Well, I think the first thing in losing Jacob that had to begin for my healing to begin was just a little bit of a shift of perspective. I found just in general that the more I talked about losing him, the more I talked about my grief and that season of brokenness, the more I found other people who were starting to speak up about it a little bit more. I think losing babies at any moment in the pregnancy is just not something that people are very often willing to talk about. And I
Mhm.
think it's important because it feels like a very lonely grief. I think I had mentioned that before. And so the more we're able to talk about it and kind of bring that out into the light, I think the more helpful it is on our journey towards healing, because grief is going to stick around forever. It's never going to go away. People say that time heals all wounds. I don't believe that. I think time changes those wounds. But for me, I began to realize that there was a gift in this grief. Losing Jacob was obviously an incredibly difficult situation, but I started to think about the idea that if God's ways are higher than our ways, and if his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, then was there something in this situation that perhaps I was missing? Because, we're not necessarily promised that our children are going to be here on earth with us for outliving our years. We're given these children and we, may have them for a moment or a lifetime, and we just don't know. And so I started to shift my perspective and just ask, okay, God, if you allowed this to happen, I know that you didn't allow it to hurt me. I know that there is some purpose here. And I began to see a purpose in that pain, and that I was beginning to discover who I was. I was beginning to unravel the person that I was always meant to be after being completely open and shattered in this grief. Who I was always meant to be began to rise to the surface, and that felt like a gift.
That's just so profound. We've talked a lot about our love of the verse Romans 8:28. That's my
Mm.
life verse. I know it's very, very special to you, and it talks about how God works all things out for His good. In your life, have you seen good come from unexpected places?
Absolutely, I have. I think, in fact, it almost seems as though many of the things that started out as being devastation or frustration or uncertainty have been the first steps of things that were all the while working out for my good. Even in losing Jacob, that began a season of life for us where we began traveling back and forth between two states. I think I had talked about that some before. And in the moment, it felt very uncertain. It felt, Lord, why are you doing this to me only weeks after I am navigating this grief? And our life just feels so unsettled. We're going back and forth between two separate states. We're trying to navigate a new business. There was so much unsure footing. But what I started to realize was that through that season, God was able to kind of pull my heart to that new state and prepare me for a transition to a life that I never would have imagined before. I never would have said that we would leave our home state. I never would have said that we would have moved away. And I also don't believe that I would have been open to that with a newborn in tow. And there has been so much richness and blessing in this season of our life here in Texas after we've moved. God has provided so many opportunities for us here that I don't think I would have seen or been open to had I not been shattered wide open with a heart that was just kind of willing to see things in a fresh light.
And just curious, during that time, I mean, any family has gone through different kind of struggles, most not as tough as what you went through, but during our family struggles, I'm either one way or another. I'm either mad at God, like, why the heck is this happening to us? Or I click into where I should be. Not all the time, but sometimes I click into where I should be, where I'm truly pressing into Him and I can't get enough. Like Bible reading, worship time, just constant, constant, constant. Were you one or the other? I mean, how can you not be mad at God during that time frame?
I will be honest and say that I think that there was some mixture of both. In many ways, um, I found myself kind of putting everything on autopilot. So we lost Jacob 10 days before Christmas. It was autopilot to get through the holidays. And then in mid-January, we began driving back and forth to Texas. It was autopilot to travel with three boys under 6 at the time. And so everything was just pushing, 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 which in many ways is probably not a healthy way to deal with things. But as I pushed through, as I was forced to continue to walk, there were no days where I could just lay in bed and muddle in my grief. I had to get up, I had to keep going. And sometimes it seems as though it was just pushing through out of this autopilot mindset. But in many ways, it was propelling me forward in a way that one day I arrived and thought, oh goodness, how did I get here? How did I get this far down the road where I felt some healing? I felt a difference in my circumstance. I felt I could look back and see the ways that God was bringing something good out of this not so good circumstance. And so I don't know that I was ever truly mad at God. I think that there was some not understanding why this had to happen. There was certainly some grief and some sadness and some emotion that anyone would associate with losing a child. But I also don't know that I would say that it was every day, Lord, I'm pressing into you. Certainly I was clinging to Him, but a lot of it was just pressing ahead, pressing ahead, pressing ahead until one day I woke up and thought, wait a second, look at all the beauty, God, that you've brought me through in the last years. I mean, it was years down the line when I recognized how much goodness had taken shape in the wake of that loss.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. What did you discover when you began to be transparent and vulnerable with your struggles? I know we had talked about this before. Tell me a little bit about that time.
I just think it's so important that we do allow ourselves to be transparent. I have always been the kind of person that was very surface. I just want to smile and say, oh, things are good. I will listen to all of your struggles, but I don't want to tell you too much about my own. And I think a lot of us are like that. A lot of us aren't willing to let down those walls and just be able to be transparent and vulnerable with other people. But the more I began to do that, the more I began to allow myself to let those walls down just a little bit, the more I realized that other people, even if they didn't share my exact story, they were beginning to feel seen and known in little moments that maybe we could resonate with each other, in little moments that perhaps were alike in our story or things that they could connect to. And I think there's something really powerful when we can feel seen and known, when we don't feel like we're just walking through a lonely journey. And so I began to see the power in being able to share and be vulnerable in two parts. Number one, other people are benefiting from that. And number two, it makes the story worth it. It gives a reason and a purpose for all of this pain that I've had to endure, all of this loss that I've seen happen in my life, and it creates a legacy of impact. And if there is nothing else, I want Jacob's life to have a legacy of impact. Even though it was short, even though it was brief, I know that God can still use his time to continue to move in other people's lives as well.
Mhm. I love that term, a legacy of impact, because it is. We talk about to our kids, we want a timeline. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, making a timeline of for your family of when God showed up for you, when
Mm.
it was a major struggle, and when he came in and rescued one of us or the whole family or whatever. And that term is so beautiful. It completely fits it. I love that. And it does bring purpose to the pain that we go through.
Right.
He restores, reclaims, redeems all of the struggles and the mess. And I love that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to write that down. That's such a good one. So how did things change? You mentioned that you at one point were controlled by an addiction to affirmation. So how did you break free from that? Because that is such a hard thing, even in normal life. And then you add on top, both of us are in the online space and on social media. And, daily you get either told you're good or bad, depending on likes and comments and those kind of things. But even in real life, out of the online space, how did you make that change and that shift from being addicted to that affirmation?
I don't know if I ever fully recognized it until a moment that I'll talk about in just a second, but my love language is words of affirmation. I will do anything if you can just tell me that I'm doing a good job. I want to hear that I'm doing a good job. And when I was really young, right before I turned 5, I lost my dad. And I think that it is very difficult for a little girl to grow up without a dad. I had a wonderful family. My mother was incredible. My extended family was incredible in being there for us and being present in our lives. But I don't know that that ever replaces the attention and affirmation of a father in your life. And so, as a result of that, I think I grew up knowing that affirmation came from the Lord, but also seeking it from other people. And the older I got, the more I realized that that was a problem, that I was just so driven by wanting to worry about what other people thought and then doing what I needed to do to make sure that other people thought well of me. It honestly wasn't until 2020, the world shut down and we are all quarantined to our homes. And in many ways, that is another situation in my life that held devastating impacts for so many people, but yet was a gift for me personally, because for months, I didn't have to impress anybody. I didn't have to be anyone except myself. We mentioned this last time, but we live out in the middle of the woods here. And so whole weeks would go by that I didn't even know if a car had passed down the road. We weren't waving to neighbors. I mean, I could just be truly, authentically myself. And one day I walked in from doing some work outside and I saw myself, no makeup on, hair a mess. And I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a really long time, my eyes looked back at me, and they were shining with a fullness that I didn't recognize. I realized I liked this person. I liked this version of myself. I liked the authenticity that was found here. And so that just began kind of a slow pull towards walking in the authenticity that I think God calls us all to, and being confident in who he's called me to be, and just allowing myself to be focused on the lane that I'm running in towards his purpose and not worry so much about what everybody else around me thinks. Now, I will say that is a constant battle that I think needs to be fought, but I'm trying to get better at it every single day.
That's so good. Just curious, kind of a little bit off topic. What tips do you have for anyone that is in the online space that is starting to write a book or getting onto social media or starting a podcast where all the eyes are on you, and there's reviews and there's likes and there's comments and all the things. Do you have any advice for anyone that is getting into that arena?
I would say focus on your lane, number one, because we can be absolutely crippled by all of the people around us who are maybe doing something similar or doing something the same. And do I need to be more like her? Or should I try this strategy? Or what about this algorithm? Just stop with that. It doesn't matter if you gain 100 followers a day or if you lose 10 followers. If you are walking in the authenticity that you are called to do, that is the only thing that matters. Be consistent, be present, quiet the noise. Don't spend endless time scrolling through all of the people that you can be comparing yourself to, and instead focus on, what do I feel like is my purpose and mission? What impact, going back to that legacy of impact, what impact do I personally want to have? And then chase after that wholeheartedly. That is the most important way to be effective in your own space. And I think that that shines through when you're able to be authentic in that way. People will be drawn to that in a special way.
That is such good wisdom, and wisdom for those of us that have kiddos coming up in the
Yes,
world of technology, to have those conversations with them and help them set those boundaries and not care so much about what the world thinks, and
absolutely.
really focusing in on their purpose. So that is such good wisdom. So you stated that the best advice you've ever been given was to walk in and act like you own the place. So I love that. I love it. Some might perceive that as a bit odd or arrogant, but you thought it was very profound, and I do too. So tell me a little bit about that.
So it actually comes from, there's a backstory to it. And it truly, for more than 20 years, has been the best advice I've ever been given. But here's the backstory to kind of put it into context. When I was in college, I was working for the man who would become my father-in-law, and he owned an electrical contracting company. And he was forever sending me on different errands when I was working in the office for him. And one day he sent me to go and pick up some house plans that we were going to be working on this job. And he said, I want you to go in. I had never been to this place before. He said, there's going to be a desk at the front, but I want you to walk straight to the back warehouse and just tell them you need these plans, and they'll give them to you and you can leave. I said, well, are you sure I shouldn't check in at the desk and tell them what I'm there for and then they'll take me to the back? He said, no, just walk in and go to the back. Well, are you sure? He said, Erin, just walk in and act like you own the place. They'll give you what you need. And so when I arrived, I walked into this place where I was going to pick up these plans. There, sure enough, was a desk at the front. There were all of these women standing there talking and, telling stories about the day. And there was a door to the warehouse. And I walked in. I did not acknowledge the women. I walked straight past and went into the warehouse. And when I did, it was kind of all eyes on me. I was very out of place. There were all of these men working in the warehouse in the back. And I found one that looked to be the most in charge. And I said, hi, I'm here to pick up some plans for Chris. He asked me to come and get them. And he just got a huge grin on his face. And he said, oh, yes, they're right over here. He gave me the plans and I was on my way. And I walked outside and I was like, oh my goodness, that worked. It worked. I just had to walk in and ask for what I needed. But the more probably underlying application that kind of began to settle over the next several years was when I knew who my father was. At the time, it was my father-in-law, but when I knew who my father was and when I knew the purpose that he had sent me there for, I could walk in knowing that I had his name in my hand, and I could go and fulfill the purpose that he had called me to with head held high and shoulders back, not worrying about what anybody else thought, not worrying about who might say you don't belong here, but instead just confidently pursuing the purpose for which I had been sent. And that remains the best advice that I've ever been given, because in life, we have to know who our Heavenly Father is. We have to know the purpose that He's called us to. And we have to be able to walk in that confidence of, I know who my Jesus is. I know what He sent me for. And I'm going to be here not in arrogance, but in confidence that He has sent me to do just this.
Mhm. That is so powerful. And when you know that He's got your back, and as we just talked about, our favorite verse, Romans 8:28, when you know he's working things out, even if the assignment he gave you is very uncomfortable, many times, I'm sure you're in uncomfortable places. I know I am as well. When we're in those uncomfortable places, if we know that it's his plan and he's got our back and he's working out the details that don't make sense right now to us, you can do it and you can stand there
Right.
confidently. I love that story. And I did not realize that you worked for your father-in-law before you were married. I love that.
Yes.
What a fun story. That's
Yeah.
great. So I don't know how you and your husband met. Did you meet through that, through your job?
Yeah. Well, no. We were dating. We actually grew up in the same church together our whole lives. I don't know if we spoke one word to each other our whole entire lives. But when I got to college, my roommate was dating his best friend. And so he started coming around because of that. And I think we just saw each other in a different light,
Yeah.
just in a different way. And so we began dating. I had a different job, and his father-in-law ended up needing someone for his growing business to help out in their office. And he asked if I would be willing to come and work for him. And I did that for several years. And it was so much fun. I'm such a girly girl, and it was such a man's world in that contracting business. But it was such a gift. I learned so much and absolutely loved every minute of it.
Oh, I love that story. That's a good one. That's wonderful. I did not know that. So I've read your upcoming book, Unraveled, Finding the Lovely When Life Comes Undone. And I'll tell you, it is good. It is
Mm.
so profound. I highly recommend it. I endorsed it, and I know that it is going to be a blessing to so many families. What do you hope others will get out of this message of your new book, Unraveled?
I hope they find freedom. I hope they find freedom to live and walk in abundant authenticity, because that has been one of the greatest struggles of my life, is learning to be confident and okay with who I am and who I was created to be, and not shrink back in fear and not worry of if I can do this or what will other people think, but instead just take one shaky, bold step at a time and allow God to guide me through it. And I hope that even if the words of the story are not identical to theirs, that they will see themselves on the pages of these stories, and that they will find freedom to know that who they are is exactly who they were meant to be, and that they can have an impact in the world around them by just living true to who God has created them to be.
Mhm. Such a good message. Beautiful cover. Kudos
Thank
to
you.
the cover. Oh, it's good. So I'm excited. I'm excited. So last topic I have, which
Mhm.
is totally off topic, but you know that I finished my upcoming cookbook. It'll be out this fall, and we are both foodies. We both
We
love
are.
our food. So you own the restaurant. Give a quick plug to your restaurant and tell us why am I curious about this? I have no idea the things that I want to know about you. What is the current best-selling recipe that you have going on there? I love the industry, the type of food that you guys serve at your restaurant. So tell our friends here online a little bit about it.
So, when we moved to East Texas, we absolutely fell in love with the area, the community, the people. Everything was wonderful. But the one thing that we were just so missing from home was the food.
Mhm.
And back home in Louisiana, the way that we show hospitality, the way we show love, I think in many places, is through food. And so, we wanted to create a place where we could just welcome people in with unmatched hospitality and give them an experience that they wouldn't soon forget. And so our restaurant is called Pelican Point. The pelican is the state bird in Louisiana. And my husband came up with that idea. That's been the name, and it has been so fitting for what we've got going. But we serve a variety of Cajun food, seafood, some Italian flair to that as well, because my husband is part Italian. And it has been so much fun to just get to meet people and love on people and serve people through the restaurant industry. It is not for the faint of heart. It is such a difficult industry to be in, but God has just been so good and faithful to us by bringing so many loyal customers who've become friends. Best selling thing on the menu at the moment is crawfish, because it's
Oh,
crawfish
okay.
season.
Yes, yes, awesome.
But
I
beyond that, we have got some homemade pizzas that are really good. And also our pasta dishes and our fried seafood both really sell really, really well. And so we're always just kind of looking for a little twist of something that we know how to do well, that maybe we want to kind of spin in a little bit different direction. And prior to crawfish season, we were doing a really neat brunch that no one had around here. And goodness gracious, I loved the brunch.
Oh, I bet. Oh, that
Yes,
sounds
but
dreamy. It's on my bucket list. So someday,
good.
like, I know we chat all the time here online, but one of these days I'm gonna meet you in person at the restaurant. I
Yes,
just
I would
love
love
the
that.
idea of mixing those different types of food together, and that's on my bucket list at some point. So,
Awesome. I would love it.
so where can our friends find you online? Tell us, about your book. It's on pre-order, right?
Mhm.
At this point.
Yes.
So where can they find this beautiful book? Where do they find you? Where's your favorite place online to hang out?
My favorite place to hang out is on Instagram, and it's just super simple. Erin Cuccio is my Instagram handle. My website is the same, erincuccio.com, and the book is available for pre-order. It's book.erincuccio.com. And when folks pre-order, I've got some really neat digital surprises that I'll be sending out just as a gift and a thank you for the support of pre-ordering. So really excited about that as well. But I just love getting to meet and connect with people online. I think it's one of the greatest gifts of this modern digital age. So many people that we maybe would have never connected to that we're able to just get to really build friendships with and connections with. And so love, love, love getting to meet new people. Would love it if people would come and hang out with me on Instagram.
Yeah, that's great. And you also have a wonderful podcast. Tell them a little bit
Thank
about
you.
that. It's a good one. It's a really good one.
Thank you. My podcast is Room for Lovely, which kind of started as a joke, Room for Lovely, because I am a mama and a girly girl in a house full of boys. And so if I was putting flowers on the table, I was making room for Lovely. Or if we were having a nice dinner, I was making some room for Lovely. But it became this larger idea where I began to think about the fact that while not every season of life is lovely, there is loveliness in every season if we're willing to look for it. And so I have the incredible privilege of getting to interview people from all walks of life who we get to share about their situation and the things that they've been through, some more lighthearted than others, but all of them who have found lovely in their circumstances. And so that comes out weekly on Tuesdays. And it's just been such a gift to be able to connect to people through that as well.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
Thank
Well,
you.
I am super excited about your upcoming book. I know I have a friend that I'm going to get it for and give to them. And I just think it will be a blessing to those. So any of your friends here online that do get it, if you end up buying it on Amazon, make sure you give a good review to her. It's life changing. I've read the entire thing. It's profound. I love your heart for grace. And we have a very similar message of finding that joy and the grace and God's goodness in the midst of struggles, because life is hard. We're
Yeah.
promised that we are going to have struggles. It's not going to be easy, but we can still find that joy through Christ in the middle of it afterwards, and he can redeem and restore any situation, the most impossible. And I just love the message that your book is putting out. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for showing up in a space that a lot of people don't talk about it. And we've had some conversations about that where there's just silence around it.
Mm.
So I think your voice is profound and just full of grace and goodness. So I'm really glad that you're doing it, and I'm excited about your book. So thank you, Erin, for joining us today, and we will chat again soon.
Thank you so much. It means the world. I appreciate it.